Hello, good evening, good morning, wherever you may happen to be. Let me just fix this one thing here and see if that makes a difference. Of course not. That would be too easy. Anyway, hello. Good to see you all. I'm here. I'm alive, more or less. Still hanging in, and wanted to check in with all of you and just to let you know, as I was actually going to read tonight. That was my initial plan. Once I figured out that even though I haven't changed over the system yet, I seem to be able to make this one work. We'll find out. That's one of the reasons we're doing this tonight, to find out how good the broadcasting quality is from this particular place, this new place. But then, of course, because we're still moving in, I couldn't find my book. So, and because it's a book that was only published, the only publisher, the only English language publisher was in England. We didn't have an American publisher for that one, which is a long story in and of itself, which I may tell at some point when I'm working on the book again, when I'm reading from the book again. But because we didn't have an American publisher, I don't have the usual tons of copies. I have the few copies that the British publishers sent to me, which, mostly have been long since given away, because that's what we tend to do with books. So, don't have the book, can't read tonight, won't be able to read tomorrow night either unless I suddenly find it, but I'm not counting on that based on how things have been going lately. So I thought I would just check back in with you all and say hello. And oh, good. I see some people have checked in already. Let me see if we get. Oh, God. Why do these comments always do this? It gives me a couple of comments, a few comments. I want to see the comments, darn it. Why won't you let me do that? Anyway, lovely to see you. And the Kindle store has it. Yeah, I'm really reluctant to buy another copy of one of my books. I had to do that for the Otherland books and several other things as well. And at a certain point, when they send me copies of these books for free, the whole idea of paying for my own books, and then eventually 6 years up the road getting a quarter for every book I paid for, it's just infuriating. Anyway, as you can see, I am in an office which is not as small as it looks. It's not as big as my other office. But one of the reasons it's so small is because, for reasons of concentration and lighting and all that, I'm pressed back against one corner of the place, and this piece of furniture here, which I will get rid of probably at some point, because it's not really anything I need, and I'd rather have the space or have a bookshelf back there or something. This was my parents' office, and they had two people in here, and as a result, everything is very close and it climbs up the walls. But anyway, we are in the house. The first and most dramatic part of the whole process is over. I've completely lost my mind. I don't know who I am most of the time. Deborah, the same way. But at least we know where we are, which is, at the moment we're here. We are, for me, back in Palo Alto, which is a whole weird kettle of fish in and of itself. Not that Palo Alto is not a very nice place. It is. I grew up here, and even though it's not the same Palo Alto as it was when I grew up, it still retains a lot of the best features. For those of you who don't know, and those of you especially who are in foreign countries, Palo Alto is the college town for Stanford University. It's where I grew up. Because it's Stanford University, and the San Francisco Bay Area, it's always been a place with a lot of people going in and out. A very interesting place to grow up. A lot of different influences, interesting people talking and doing things and giving presentations and all that. In fact, there was one point where Deborah and I went to a friend's house for a birthday dinner in London, at which there were 8 people present, including Deborah and I. And of those 8 people, the only one who hadn't lit. Now, this, mind you, we're in London. We're in Pimlico in London. Of those 8 people present, The only one who hadn't lived in Palo Alto was Deborah, who, although she had visited it at that point. And the rest of these people were from all over Europe. They were, several of them were English, but the birthday party host, whoops, the birthday party host was originally from Portugal. So it's that kind of a small town where you get people from all over. So a lot of that aspect is, I'm sure, still there. I haven't been back long enough to know. Um, but it was one of the things. My parents were always very active and interested in international connections and things, and they traveled a great deal. I put it in the past tense because now that my mom is gone, my dad is getting on, and he's not in very physically good shape. So I don't think there'll be much traveling for him. He doesn't seem very interested in the idea. But they traveled all over the place. They went to China and Russia and Scandinavia and traveled many times to the central part of Europe, to France and Germany and England and, Spain. And they got to see a lot of places, and they were very involved in something called Neighbors Abroad, which is an organization that puts together sister cities. So my mom wound up being the president of the Palo Alto chapter for quite a few years. I think because it's one of those kind of thankless jobs that once you got it, everybody else is kind of like, oh, thank God. In my case, in my mom's case, Barbara's doing it. She'll do a good job. We can all just forget about it. The rest of us don't have to do it. But so because of that, Palo Alto had many. They have a sister city in Oaxaca, Mexico. The sister city in Linköping, Sweden, and several others. What's the name of the one in Amsterdam? I'm in the Netherlands. It'll come to me. And several others as well. I think in Germany, I don't remember if it was Bremen or if that's where my family connection is, definitely in Bremen. But so as a result, this also led to friendships with people in lots of different countries. And my parents would always be putting somebody up, a youth soccer player or something, or, and somebody traveling from another country whose place to stay had fallen through. So there's a lot of stuff I feel a deep connection with about being here. And being in my parents' office, even though it may not be, quite, it hasn't been tadified yet. As I said, when there are bookshelves full of books, and my clutter as compared to the clutter left over from my parents being here, then it will probably feel more like mine. Enschede. Enschede is the name of the Dutch sister city. Linköping in Sweden and Enschede in the Netherlands, and several others. So anyway, I don't know why I got off into that. Oh, just talking about Palo Alto and being back in Palo Alto and my parents' version of Palo Alto, which was, very much one of people involved in the community. Whereas my memories of Palo Alto have mostly to do with being a teenager or a kid. And being a kid who did lots of things and a teenager who did lots of things, not all of them necessarily things I want to admit to, but, and in the 60s and 70s. And it was a very different place then, in the sense it was more of a college town. This part of the Bay Area has always had a big kind of tech presence because of the defense contractors like Lockheed and Raytheon and all these places. But it was primarily a defense-oriented, and the rise of personal computers obviously kicked off the next phase where it became Silicon Valley proper, and the computer business took over and brought hundreds of millions of dollars into the area and basically made it kind of permanently a technology hub, this whole area. And Palo Alto is kind of Palo Alto or San Jose, depending, are kind of the uncrowned kings of Silicon Valley, and the venture capital is connected to Palo Alto and stuff. So it's changed. It's changed. It's not the kind of hippie college town that it was when I was growing up. But it's still, still a nice place, and I have a lot of deep sentimental connections with it. But it's also weird, as you can imagine, moving back to your hometown, living in your parents' house. Very weird. But that's the part of the journey that we're on in the moment at the moment. So, and we did. It was an entertainingly weird journey too. I hasten to say, um, we just we were in the middle of the move, and literally, with people, we were, because we're keeping our house and we're renting it out. We were doing a lot of remodeling, so we had that going on while we were trying to do the move, and we were trying to help clear out my parents' house and get stuff to my dad and help take care of my dad in his new residence. And in the middle of all of that stuff, the people who'd been storing a couple of tons of our stuff for several years now phoned us up and said, "Oh, by the way, we're going out of business. So if you don't want us to sort of dump all your stuff in the street and set it on fire, you'll have to come and pick it up." And so we dutifully, in the midst of everything else, we got the movers who were helping us with other stuff and said, "Come with us down to San Jose and help us get this stuff out, and we'll sort through it all and throw away some and keep the rest." And we got down there and discovered that they'd moved without telling us, and they were in an entirely different part of the Bay Area that we were never going to get to that day. So it's just been a lot of things like that where, the stuff that's already daunting, thank God you didn't know about the other stuff that was going to make it even more daunting. But we've survived. We have brought two kids with us, because they were gonna be chucked out at the time of the move, and then we realized, hang on a second, we have very dependent animals, and we want to go to England because we haven't been there for a long time. So we're aiming for like sometime in the fall, and we have to have a house sitter because our animals, our dogs, are never going to survive, without regular company. They're very people-y dogs. They've been peopled completely. So we figured, like, okay, well, if we don't throw the kids out yet, we'll keep them around and use them as free house sitting when the time comes. Not that that's a very good bargain, because we've been supporting all these little buggers for years. But anyway, so we moved with the two kids, and I say kids, they're both young men in their 20s. And we are slowly settling in. We still have boxes everywhere. Again, the view behind me is so much less shocking than the view of the rest of the room, or God forbid, the rest of the house. I won't inflict it on you. So that's kind of generally what's going on with that aspect of things. What else do I want to tell you about? I have had a chance to, in the midst of all this, I have carved out some niches for myself to do some writing. So I am back to work finishing up on Navigator's Children, which is really largely done. It's like 98, 99% finished. It's just a question of me doing a last few number of things before sending it off to the proofreader and begging Isaac for his forgiveness for taking so long to get him something so he can make maps, because I definitely want him to continue doing the maps since he's been doing them for this whole series, and he's doing a gorgeous job. So that's where I'm at. So on the edit, which is almost the last thing I'm going to be doing with it before it goes off for proofreading, I'm on about chapter 36 or so I'm up on chapter 40, 41 now of about 54 chapters total. So I'm most of the way through that. Another couple of weeks at the most, and that will all be done. And the book will go off. And even though nothing is exactly like you think it will be, this is one of the great tragedies of being in any kind of position where you imagine what you're going to do before you do it. It's always perfect in imagination. You leave the areas you're not sure about kind of misty and vague, and as a result, you're able to kind of visualize whatever you're working on in a sort of perfected form, in a platonic ideal, as it were. And this is one of the reasons why, for me, the first part of writing a book is always the best part. And because that part is before you've actually committed anything to anything, and you're just thinking about it and you're playing with it. But not only is that part a great deal of fun, because it's it's the sandbox. You know, you can build anything you want to, but it's also because you can still believe in the pure platonic ideal of what your creation is going to be. In my case, usually books, although, you know, it might be writing a song or drawing or other things I've done too. And most of you know how that is. You imagine it perfectly, whether it's your garden or, you know, your speech to your boss about why you should get a raise. It doesn't always go perfectly, but there is that point in time before reality rushes in and stomp dances all over your beautiful concept, when it is still perfect. And I love that stage. So that'll be one of the nice things. This book is not perfect, but I'm pleased with how it's come out, and it's wrapping up a huge amount of material. And I've said this, I think, already to you guys. It's not only having to wrap up these books, 4 very long books, and the stories go with them, but the 2 short books as well, both feed into this. And also the whole first set, the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn books, and even to a small degree, The Burning Man, the short novel, which, even though it's set in a completely different time in history, it touches on a few of the things in these books. And in fact, I actually put something in one of these books to explain a mistake that I'd made back writing The Burning, or not a mistake, but I'd committed to something in The Burning Man that I no longer wanted to commit to. So I explained it I explained it in Brothers of the Wind. But then it comes up again, I think, in this book, maybe. Anyway, doesn't matter. So that's where Navigator's Children is at. Navigator's Children is slowly, like a very old elephant. It is making its way to the elephant's graveyard. No, that's a terrible metaphor. It's almost finished, and I can start doing other things. I can finish the Dragons of Ordinary Farm, the last book of that, because it's going to be 3 books, at least for this first part. And it's only taken 20 years, so, you know, no problem. And then I'm going to get to work on what will probably be another Ostenard book, although it'll be more of a kind of a standalone first book of a series of connected but not sequential books, if that makes any sense. More like, yeah, like crime fiction or something, where you go back to some of the same characters, but it's not like one whole story told sequentially. It's different snippets of time and things happening. And that's the book that for now I'm calling The Splintered Sun, and which is a story of Flan's crows, among others, where that whole concept initially came from, because it's now become just sort of in my imaginary world of Ostenard, it has become a sort of a generic name for any group of bandits. But we're going to go back and meet the original Flan's crows and see what they get up to, which I'm looking forward to. I think it's going to be fun. Let me think. Anything else that needs to be talked about? No? Well, let me see who said hello, and I will check in with you guys and say hello if I can actually bring up. Oh, Kay asks, Kay Summer says, have you ever heard about the radio play they made in German from Otherland with more than 200 speakers and special orchestral music? It's a spectacle, really great. Yes, of course, and it is really great. And it's one of the few things that somebody came to me and said, we'd like to do this, that actually happened. And the work was brilliant. It was based on the very fine German translation by Hans-Ulrich Möhring, and it was Walter Adler of Köln who produced and directed the whole thing, who had done a bunch of radio plays, and it had a whole lot of really well-known German acting talent in it, some just splendid people. Sophie Royce and Nina Haas and various others. I mean, my German is not very good, but I listened to the whole thing. I thought it was brilliantly done. And as I said, it's one of the few times when I first met Walter in a hotel lobby in probably Stuttgart or somewhere, but maybe it was in Cologne. And he told me what he was planning to do and said, you know, you probably won't hear anything from me for a couple of years at least because I got to go out and raise the money because we're doing this for essentially public radio. And I said, oh, okay. You know, and like most of these things, I just figured that was the last I'd ever hear about it. And then, like a few years later, Walter called me up and said, well, I got the money. Now we're going to start doing it. And then started to explain to me what was actually going to happen. And I went, wow, that's quite a project you're getting into there. And he's like, I've done this before. I'll make it work. And he did, and did a brilliant job, too. I mean, you know, it's one of the few examples I have of my work being adapted for another format or another medium. And I thought he did brilliantly, and I thought everybody did brilliantly. So, yes, I do know it, and I'm very proud of it, albeit second-handedly, since it was not my work to convert it into a radio play. They just took my books and did that. But yeah, they did a great job. Anyway, I'm going to say hello to some of the people here that I see. Of course, it's not giving me all of everybody. But I see Rosalba. I see Dirk. And Andre. Oh, God, I'm doing the Miss Nancy from Romper Room thing again. Rosalba, hello. Dirk, hello. Andre, pleasure, as always. Deb. This is Deb Gates, not my wife Deb, who's sleeping the sleep of the just in the other room. Maria Jose, good to see you too. James, a pleasure. Mr. Ron, good to see you, buddy. Kristen, a pleasure, as always. Jeremy, another longtime buddy. Jeremy's actually saw us, like, I think the day we moved in. Jeremy doesn't live that awfully far from here, so I kind of, you know, looked up and first Jonathan and then Jeremy showed up, the Ehrman brothers, which was really nice, which was very sweet and made me feel like, oh yeah, of course I do still have friends in Palo Alto. Anyway, so hello, Jeremy. Good to see you. Christina, Chris, that's Chris Fab, and Cliff. Hello, Cliff. And Mahmoud and Hazel. There was my mother-in-law popped in, and I didn't even get a chance to say hello to her. Well, if you're still there, Hazel, I am saying hello now. And we're all doing fine, and we miss you, but we're going to come see you before too awfully long. That's underway now. We're figuring that all out. Annie, good to see you as always, and Harmony, and Kay Summer, and Nicole, and Mark, checking in from Yorkshire, and three more, then it says, and three more. So I'm not sure who those other three are because it won't give me it won't give me more than those comments either. Which is weird because as far as I know, the default should be to show me all the comments, but whatever. Oh, and Cindy, another Cindy Squires is here too. So hello, Cindy. Good to see you. Anyway, so that's where we are at. And as I said, I don't really have anything to read tonight, so I wasn't going to read. That was never the plan. I mainly just wanted to check in with everybody and say hello and tell you that I missed communicating with you all and that I am not dead and that the rumors are quite exaggerated, even if I did start them myself. No, I didn't start any rumors. I don't have time to start any rumors. Had a really nice interview today with Paige Chewing. God, I'm so ashamed of myself for having just gone blank on this. Two really nice interviewers. Hang on, let me see if I've got the original version of it here. Yes, Page Chewing, episode 48. And I'm sure that if you're interested, it was quite a long interview. Now, many of you have heard me say a lot of these kinds of things before because obviously people tend to have similar types of questions to ask of me, but they were very good questions and they're really nice people and we had fun and it was like an hour and 40 minutes we spent talking, or I spent talking because that's what I do is go. Anyway, Page Chewing, episode 48 with PL and Taylor. So I'm sure they still have that available or will have it available. It was live today, but I'm sure that they have a resource where you can watch it. If that kind of masochism of hearing more of me going blah, 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 blah appeals to you, then first of all, I pity you deeply, but hey,
You do you, and if you doing you includes you doing me, then me is okay with that. You know? Hey, no judgment. Okay, what else? Anything else? So we are in the process. I'm going to be trying to find my book by next week. I might possibly after that, after we finish, because we've only got like another two chapters, long chapter left. I don't know, not much. Couple of nights at the most reading of the Secrets of Ordinary Farm, and I do have some other long term plans for some stuff, but I might read one more short thing. I might read Brothers of the Wind because that would give me a bit of a rest from all the voices since it's all told by the same character. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment. So I'm intending to keep doing this. It's just going to be a question of if the new setup, which happens, I think, Thursday for, the new routers and all that stuff that shows up, if that all works properly, then you'll probably see me again next week. Same TAD time, same TAD channel. So that's where I'm at. That's where we're at. And this is just about me getting ready to shut it down for the night because, as I warned you, it wasn't going to be necessarily a long get together since I don't have anything to read. But if anybody at first is interested in asking any questions or anything, I'd be happy to. Okay. Oh, Angie, speaking of questions, Angie has said that I should remember to mention the time zone. And in fact, Angie, you're absolutely right. I think that's the first time I have ever not put the time zone in. I've occasionally put the wrong daylight savings or not daylight savings thing in. In other words, whether it was Pacific Daylight Time or Pacific Standard Time. But I think that's the first time I haven't actually mentioned that it was Pacific something time. So you're dead right about that, and I will endeavor not to mess that up in the future for fear of people being confused. Because I am never confused myself, but I can see where it might happen to other people, he said, somewhat ironically. Anyway, okay, so if there's anything else that people want to know, bum, bum, bum. Yeah, I see that, for instance, Kelly asked what time zone. Um, and Pacific Daylight Time. Yeah, I will do better. As I said, this is more one-time things because I haven't put the time up for so long. I just completely forgot that that's what I normally do. And I was so proud of myself for remembering to put a title on it, but I forgot to put the what time zone I was in. So anyway, if anybody has any other questions they want to add before I hang it up, because I will be hanging it up fairly quickly now, because I don't want to just sit here talking all night. I mean, you folks deserve better than that. And Chris, who is one of our Chris Fab, FAB. Chris has sent a thing saying, "Hi Tad, I've created a fan art channel on the YouTube account and uploaded the first video." So that might be something you would like to check out too, even if you're not necessarily in the market to listen to more of me reading. There might be some interesting fan art to check there. And James asks, "How is Walter, Lord of Disutility, coping with the move?" Walter is Walter. He's largely oblivious to everything that does not concern him getting fed or getting petted. And he wants you to be where he wants you to be when he wants you to be there. He is now mostly deaf, if not entirely deaf, I think. Still super active, though. I mean, he covers literally, this is not an exaggeration, 5 to 10 times the amount of space that whoever is with him or around him. So if I'm walking across the house in the 30, 40 feet it takes me to get to the other room, Walter has usually gone to that room and back and gone to that room and back and run off into another side room and run out and run ahead to go look at something else and come back. And, it's just exhausting. And this is like a 12-year-old Chihuahua. But he has very long legs, and he eats like a finch, and he just runs constantly. So the deafness seems to be just to make him more annoying. It doesn't seem to be an indicator that he is losing health in any way, shape, or form. And he is tremendously irritating because now that he can't hear anymore, he barks about everything. It's just like somebody leaves the room or somebody's eating and he wants you to know he's there, and it's just and it's horrifying. But he's our dog and we love him. Johnny is struggling. Big dog Johnny is struggling a little bit with the new place, because for one thing, that my parents' roof creaks, and I think it's where we added on the addition many years ago, that there's something about the two different kinds of wood, maybe because it was a good 30 plus years after the house had originally been built when they added on this part where I'm sitting now. And I suspect that's why we get so many creaks just on this part of the house. But every time it happens, Johnny leaps up and runs out of the room. Plus, of course, 4th of July is approaching. So there's all kinds of, I can't think of a polite term, dork heads. A lot of dork heads shooting off fireworks somewhere. I don't know where. Not in our neighborhood or anything. But, there's people setting off fireworks in the middle of the night. My Deborah was like, I thought it was a gunfight. And I'm going, no, it's not a gunfight, honey. Not going on for that long. It's just idiots with fireworks. The police have nothing to do in Palo Alto most evenings. So trust me, if that was a gunfight, there would be police sirens. There would have been police sirens 10 minutes ago. But anyway, I only brought this up because, of course, so Johnny is a little bit hyper tense about new place, new things. He is getting walked more here, which is much better. And eventually, over time, I hope to, kind of normalize him a little bit because we were a bit islanded where we were. Anyway, so Johnny's fine. Let me think. Anything else that I need to tell anybody? Of course, I'm only getting the last few comments. I don't know what that thing is about and why it's doing that. Okay, well, here's a couple other people I haven't said hello to yet. There's Christine Horjak, or Horjak, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And David Nelson, Justina Wolok, or Wolok Kukila, if I'm reading that right. Wolok Kukila, and Rika Bach, Alice Popa. Hello, Alice. Thomas Trotter. There's lots of people who've checked in here that I didn't get in the first group. Andy Angel. Hello, Andy. Margie Keith. I don't know if I said hello yet. Bobby Jane Howell. Hello, hello. Nicholas Marple. And again, I get and 5 more. Oh, Facebook. Why do you curse me with this whole thing with comments? Why can't I just see comments? Anyway, doesn't matter. So with that, I am going to hang it up for the night. Those of you who stopped in to join me, I hope I haven't been too awfully boring. Missed you all. I will be back next week, barring, again, acts of God or acts of dog that prevent me from being able to. But failing that, I will be back next week at the same time and should have a book to read. If I haven't found my other one, I'll get a copy somehow. I don't know where, but I'll get a copy. So basically that's it. That's it for tonight, but I did just want to kind of get my feet wet and you could dabble your toes a little bit too. And so here we are, and I'm going to wrap it up. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your patience while I was out of town. I will remember to post my time zone next time. And I do truly appreciate y'all being here. That's one of the reasons I try to say the names and say hello to people. But whatever the case, I'm sure you know that by now, that I'm very grateful to have readers, and in this case to have listeners, I guess, watchers, unindicted co-conspirators, however you want to phrase it. Anyway, so thank you so much. So in the next week, take good care of yourselves. Take good care of your friends, family, loved ones. And yeah, peace, be good, be well, and I will talk to you real soon.